Benito Mussolini. In April 1945, Mussolini was no longer the proud figure shouting from balconies in Rome. He was running. Disguised in a German coat and helmet, he tried to flee toward Switzerland as Allied forces advanced through northern Italy. On April 27th, communist partisans stopped a German convoy near Lake Como. Among the soldiers, they recognized their leader. He was pulled aside and arrested. His longtime companion, Clara Petacci, was with him. The next day, April 28th, Mussolini and Petacci were taken to a small village called Giulino di Mezzegra. They were stood against a wall near a villa gate. A partisan stepped forward with a submachine gun. Within seconds, both were dead. But that was not the end. Their bodies were loaded into a truck and driven to Milan, to Piazzale Loreto. Months earlier, Mussolini's regime had executed 15 partisans in that exact square and left them on display. Now history circled back. At dawn on April 29th, the corpses were dumped on the ground. A crowd gathered fast. People kicked the bodies, spat on them, shot at them again. One woman reportedly fired bullets into Mussolini's corpse, claiming revenge for her sons. Then the bodies were hung upside down from a metal girder at a gas station. The man who once loved spectacle at the end became one, Adolf Hitler. By late April 1945, Berlin was falling apart. Soviet artillery pounded the city day and night. The Third Reich, which Hitler had promised would last 1,000 years, had survived barely 12. Underground, beneath the Reich Chancellery, Hitler hid inside a concrete bunker. The corridors smelled of damp air and cigarette smoke. Maps were still spread across tables, but the red Soviet lines were closing in from every side. The man who once commanded millions now issued orders to armies that no longer existed. On April 29, 1945, he married Eva Braun in a small midnight ceremony inside the bunker. It was surreal. Outside, the city burned. Inside, champagne glasses clinked. The next afternoon, April 30th, around 3:30 p.m., Hitler said his final goodbyes. He and Eva retreated into a private room. A gunshot echoed shortly after. Witnesses later said Hitler bit into a cyanide capsule and shot himself in the head at the same time. Eva took poison beside him. Their bodies were carried upstairs, placed in the garden, soaked in gasoline, and set on fire as Soviet shells exploded nearby. The dictator who sent millions to their deaths chose to escape judgment himself. He left behind ashes, rubble, and a scar across history that still hasn't faded. He was 56 years old, Nicolae Ceausescu. On December 22, 1989, Bucharest erupted in chaos. For years, Ceausescu had ruled Romania with tight control, secret police, and crushing poverty. Now crowds filled the streets shouting his name in anger. He tried to speak from a balcony, but the crowd booed him live on national television. Panic flickered across his face. That same day, he and his wife Elena fled by helicopter from the roof of the Communist Party headquarters. Within hours, they were captured by the army. 3 days later, on Christmas Day, they stood trial in a small military room in Targoviste. The trial lasted less than an hour. Charges included genocide and corruption. The verdict was certain before it began. Guilty as death. Minutes later, the couple was led outside into a courtyard. Soldiers lined up. Ceausescu began singing the communist anthem as Elena shouted in protest. The firing squad opened fire. Over 100 bullets tore through them. Their bodies lay in the snow. That evening, Romanian television broadcast footage proving they were dead. A dictator who ruled for decades fell in 3 days. Power vanished faster than he ever imagined. Muammar Gaddafi. For 42 years, Gaddafi ruled Libya with a strange mix of brutality and theatrics. He called himself the brother leader and styled himself as a revolutionary king. By October 2011, his regime was collapsing during Libya's civil war. NATO airstrikes targeted his convoy as he fled the city of Sirte. Vehicles burned, fighters scattered. Gaddafi escaped the wreckage and hid inside a concrete drainage pipe with a handful of bodyguards. Rebel fighters found him there on October 20th. Cell phone videos show a bloody, disoriented Gaddafi being dragged through the dirt. He begs for mercy as gunfire cracks in the background. The footage is brutal. Within minutes, he is shot dead. His body is taken to Misrata and placed in a commercial freezer. For days, people line up to stare at the corpse of the man who ruled them for decades. Eventually, he is buried in an unmarked grave in the desert. The location is kept secret. A ruler who once demanded loyalty died hiding in a hole in the ground. Joseph Stalin. On the night of March 1st, 1953, Stalin hosted a dinner at his dacha outside Moscow. He drank heavily with top Soviet officials, men who feared him deeply. Purges, arrests, and executions had defined his rule. Around 4 a.m., he dismissed everyone and went to bed. The next morning, something was wrong. Stalin did not emerge from his room. He did not ring for guards. Hours passed. His staff were terrified to enter without permission. Under Stalin, a wrong move could mean death or prison, so they waited. It was not until late evening that someone finally went inside. They found the 74-year-old dictator lying on the floor, soaked in his own waste, unable to speak. He had suffered a massive stroke. He had been there for nearly 12 hours. Doctors were rushed, but help came late. Some historians believe his inner circle deliberately delayed. Others suspect poisoning. Stalin lived for days, half paralyzed, struggling to breathe. On March 5th, at 9:50 p.m., he died. Crowds wept publicly. Privately, many felt relief. The man who ruled by fear lay helpless because no one dared to check on him. Saddam Hussein. In December 2003, Saddam was found hiding in a small underground hole near Tikrit. The once feared Iraqi leader looked disheveled, with a thick beard and hollow eyes. After a long trial for crimes against humanity, he was sentenced to death. Before dawn, on December 30th, 2006, Saddam was led into an execution chamber in Baghdad. He wore a black coat. A noose hung above him. The scene was supposed to be controlled and official. It wasn't. Guards in the room began shouting insults. Saddam responded by reciting prayers. He stood straight as the rope was placed around his neck. Someone in the chamber recorded everything on a cell phone. The grainy video later spread across the world. You can hear voices taunting him. You can see the trap door beneath his feet. When it opened, his body dropped fast. The fall snapped his neck. Within hours, the footage was everywhere. Some called it justice. Others called it chaos. The man who ruled Iraq through fear died in front of millions of onlookers. Pol Pot. For nearly 4 years, Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge regime turned Cambodia into a prison camp. Nearly 2 million people died from execution, starvation, and forced labor. But Pol Pot did not die in battle. He vanished into the jungle after Vietnamese forces overthrew his regime in 1979. For almost 20 years, he lived near the Thai border, moving between camps, protected by loyalists. By 1998, he was 73 years old and under house arrest by a rival faction of his own movement. In April 1998, remaining Khmer Rouge leaders agreed to hand him over for an international war crimes trial. Days later, on April 15th, Pol Pot died in his sleep in a jungle hut. Officially, heart failure. Some suspected suicide by poison. The timing raised eyebrows. Journalists were invited to photograph his body to prove he was truly dead. The images showed a thin old man on a bamboo bed, surrounded by plastic sheets and simple tools. There was no courtroom, no final judgment, no confrontation with survivors. His body was cremated on a makeshift pyre of tires and scrap wood. The man responsible for mass graves escaped them himself. Franco. By 1975, Spain was ruled by a man who could barely breathe on his own. Franco had held power since 1939. Decades of censorship, prisons, and silence carried his name. But in October 1975, his body began to fail. Heart attacks struck, internal bleeding followed. He was rushed to a Madrid hospital, pale and swollen, surrounded by doctors and machines. For weeks, tubes kept him alive. Blood transfusions, dialysis, surgery after surgery. The regime would not let him die. Spain waited while its ruler drifted in and out of consciousness. On November 20th, 1975, the machines could do no more. He died in a quiet hospital room. No gunfire, no uprising, just one organ failure to another. A man who controlled a nation for 36 years ended not with chaos, but with a slow, silent shutdown.